Hello, hello. My name is Armand King, and thank you for being with me today. Um, Today, we are going to be discussing root causes of domestic urban pimping and prostitution. Um, Addressing root causes, where did it start? Where did it come from? And thank you for being with me today on such a sensitive and personal topic to me in my life, as you will learn and grow to hopefully understand. So thank you. Please go about this conversation with an open mind, open heart, and leave judgment and ego in your back pocket today. Before I start, I always like to, topics like this when addressing groups. I have a disclaimer, and this disclaimer came out of years of presenting and just not doing it right, to be honest, and not really recognizing the harm that and the emotions and the trauma that a lot of this conversation, um, you know, how impactful it's been to people and lives. So this disclaimer, please listen, and hopefully this covers, pretty much generally anything that can come from this, and in hopes that you understand where I'm coming from and what this conversation, uh, you know, may bring out of you. But if who I was offends you, I would like to ask for your forgiveness ahead of time. I'm 44 years old now, as of a few days ago. Being involved in many of the former lives that I had and the trauma that I myself produced was an old version of me, a child version of me. The subject matter that we are going to be talking about, potentially sensitive and triggering to some. Just want to make sure you're aware of that. And what I speak about comes from my personal experience, my personal knowledge and information that I've gathered over the years, and it's based on my opinions. Okay, and like my mom used to say, everyone has opinions are like something. Everybody has one, and most of them stink. So I appreciate you listening to me and my expert lived experience opinions. And the subculture of pimping and prostitution that I'm talking about is horrible. I do not wish that upon anybody's life, either the trafficking or the being trafficked. No one should have to go through these things. I do not condone it in any way. And when I speak about domestic urban human sex trafficking, I am being really specific to this one area of trafficking, primarily that comes from impoverished urban black and brown communities in the United States and throughout North America, really, as I have been diving deep into Canada for the past 6 years, very identical, and most of it we brought up. So I'm speaking very specific. I do not put an umbrella over all trafficking. They deserve their own. Vision and that to be able to be dissected to fully eradicate the problem. There are some nuances that are there's some things that are similar, but there are different types, different levels of trafficking, and I do not pretend to be an expert at all of them. And I beg you to please be careful of those who profess to be experts at all trafficking. Anyway, different subject matter. Brief background on myself. Just who is Armand King? Why am I here? What makes me a lived experience expert and able to present on this subject matter. Like many, I have, if you see the slide here, there's a picture of me as a baby. We all start off as babies, newborns, blank sheets of paper. And through our experiences, different childhood experiences, whether they're adverse childhood experiences, pleasant, all of these things are the building blocks to create who you are to become as an adult. Myself, grew up mostly, from birth to 10 years old in a toxic household. Through my middle school years, a homeless kid. Homeless not meaning sleeping under a bridge or the stereotypical pushing shopping carts homeless, but bouncing house to house, couch to couch, wherever a friend or a family member would let you sleep until they were tired of you. Been experiencing the loss of a life, at a very early age due to murder. At 10 years old, my aunt was murdered. That was the first time. Really didn't fully understand that, what was transpiring and what had happened. By 12 years old, during this homeless period, my one of my childhood best friends was murdered. Larry, he was 13 years old, and even at that time didn't fully understand the concept of life. I just knew there was a pain, and this repeated over and over through, trauma, rejection from father, all these things. The pain and trauma just continued to grow throughout the years into my teen years. Getting gang involved early on during that really middle school, merging into high school years, gang involved, which merged into this clique lifestyle. Once again, all of these things can be unpacked, and unfortunately I don't have, in 45 minutes I can't, so I'm going to be tapping into some subject matter, but you'll get my contact information at the end. Willing to, if you're here and you're listening to this, we are now colleagues and friends. Please reach out to me. I don't mind going deeper into these subjects, but I will be kind of just going through this for the sake of time. Involved in drug sales as an early kid, 12, 13 years old, and using that as a means to get my family out of poverty. Found myself in a position of having to be a man early on. About 15 years old, my next best friend was murdered, Lawrence Smith, and then just repeatedly losing many colleagues, many peers. I might not necessarily say they were best friends, but just people in my community, people that I knew, people that I went to school with. So continual loss of life and trauma into my young adulthood. By 16, 17 years old, major hustling. Had my first apartment in my junior year, had to pay my own rent. So by senior year, I'm literally an adult. Something that no one should have to be forced or be able to be a part of. And again, just continuously losing life into 21 years old, being incarcerated for 3 years for a nonviolent offense. First time being incarcerated, doing 3 years in the federal penitentiary, served time in 9 institutions across the United States. And right before I came home, my brother, Richard Wilson, was murdered. So my history built on trauma, a lot of good mixed in there too, a lot of fun times, but that's an overview of my young life. And with all that being said, now my present, that is who and what I came from. But I've been, for the past 15 years, fully engaged in community service work, continuously still losing friends along the path even in the community service work. Why I do this, I didn't choose this. This wasn't like, oh, Armand's about to be a youth advocate. I'm going to go out here and help people. I'm going to be talking to folks about human sex trafficking, about pimping and prostitution. I want to help communities. That was nowhere in my mind, nothing I wanted to do, but I believe it was a chosen path for me. It really just came to my attention that I was in my bad acts, in my bad ways, in my youth. I was actually raising a generation below me to follow in my footsteps, being the father and mentor that I didn't have to them, showing them the wrong way. And now when I reached approaching 30 years old and this was brought to my attention, there was a challenge put on my life that I needed to do something different for this youth, something that was missing from me and my friends' life. And what does that look like? Being the new cool, being somebody who I needed, who my friends hoped that if they were living needed still, right? So I've been spreading that message, doing trainings, consultings, building new leaders, really pushing fentanyl awareness. To this day, I have lost 33 loved ones to fentanyl. So that's a major piece of my life now. Currently in the works and what's being created. I've launched a curriculum for young men about 3 years ago. After 10 plus years of doing direct service, I have moved away from the direct service arena and now creating education and mentoring tools for schools, for mentoring groups, for nonprofits, for parents to use to work more on prevention and helping kids before they go down that full path. So early prevention tools and really a lot of the stuff we're talking about now. I have a documentary coming out soon, but that's my present. Right. So if we want to talk about the root causes of domestic urban pimping and prostitution, I have to go back. Addressing root causes and not just bare surface roots. Got to go deeper. Where did this begin, in my opinion? Where did this start? And my research, especially rooted right here in the United States, we cannot move past the beginning. And this, what we're witnessing now, is not the beginning of the human sex trafficking explosion. It's just happening. People just start getting trafficked. Like, no. The colonization of America was a beginning, a birthplace of major trafficking here on this soil. Yes, people say it's been going on for thousands of years. Yes, I'm focusing here on the root causes and where we're going to go throughout this conversation. But you see the images here on our on my slide. The indigenous women in America, when they came over, just the whole sexual exploitation of them that is very rarely ever talked about. The selling, the trading of women, that mentality has been here in this soil for hundreds of years. And if you look here, I have a picture of, I can't pronounce that name, please forgive me. I failed French. I never even took French, but Cadillac is his name. Oh, Cadillac. So this gentleman whose name is Cadillac, who is coined as the father of Detroit. I just want to tap in with this as a whole. I went down the rabbit hole many years ago researching this gentleman, and when he came across my radar, like the Cadillac tool, the car, is a crown jewel when it comes to this subculture of pimping in America. Why is that? So I start looking at who is the founder of Detroit, one of the main cities, what is oftentimes considered the mecca of the subculture of pimping and prostitution. Why is he the founder of it? I'm looking at his hair and the way it drapes, and it almost looks like something emulated by many of the pimps in this subculture. It is very, very ironic to me. And when I looked into his history, this gentleman, at one point in time, he was incarcerated for the sale and trade of women. But some may say mark that as coincidental. But I think there's a lot of deep roots and connection to this learned behavior from over the centuries here in the United States. And we cannot talk about domestic urban human sex trafficking or sex trafficking in general here in the United States and forget about the largest of the sex trafficking that's ever occurred here since the establishment of this country. And I know people are working actively to erase this part of history, but we cannot sit here and act as if this is some new occurrence and this just started happening. Where did this come from? No, this is deep in the soil. From the transatlantic slave trade, and not just what we know of that and people brought over to pick cotton to build this industry, to build America economically, but what happened to the people that were brought over, the purposeful, strategic destruction of the families, specifically Black families of African descent here, the devaluing of the woman, put on it's over sexualized and exploited. That root that was there in front of everyone, that deep embedding into the heads of all the people, not just those inflicting it, but those that were being the survivors and the victims of it, where the slave master, the owner, friends, family could rape at will. There was no exchange of funds. If they wanted it, they took it from kids, from women, from men. And then you think about, the breeding camps that you would rarely, if ever, hear about. Like, yes, they were bringing slaves, bringing labor trafficking across the seas, but there was actual sex camps and breeding camps here, creating their workforce, putting what the people thought were the strongest together to build a stronger slave, and these places that were for pleasure. This is here. It's been here. This is not a new epidemic. This is not a new crisis. So let's address the roots if we're really going to talk about the roots of this. We have the Emancipation Proclamation, 1863. Slaves were quote unquote freed. But for many years, as we've learned recently, and a lot of people learned recently about Juneteenth and the slaves in Texas that were discovered that were still working as if they were slaves, had no idea. So this wasn't just in Texas, this was throughout the United States. It wasn't no magical one day everybody freed. They knew they were freed. People who were benefiting economically just suddenly just said, okay, you can go. This was a 100-year process. And even though new slaves weren't brought over, these camps still operated. So you have that. Okay, you have now people who are released impoverished. There was no severance fee, no severance pay. There was no retirement. Oh, you spent generations and 400 years in servitude. Here goes what you were owed. No, they were released impoverished and uneducated. You know, education was outlawed. Reading books at one point you would be killed for. So now you have uneducated, impoverished people now released into society to fend for self. No 40 acres and a mule. Biggest joke there was. But one thing for sure that didn't end was the desire from the former slave masters to still have this sexual pleasure. This still occurred. Only now it wasn't as easy to just rape at will. And then when my research, this was the foundation of the exchange for goods, exchange for property, exchange for money, exchange for services for that sexual pleasure. And in a different conversation, we'll talk about it. And if you've been in this anti-sex trafficking movement and have a little knowledge previous to this conversation, you think about who is the statistical buyer, the John. It's 9 times out of 10 you're going to find a straight white male who is upper middle class, who can afford to pay for sex. That person has not changed throughout time. And I'm going to breeze through this. Sorry for the history lesson, but I think that's what we're here for. The history. Where did this come from? And we have the Jim Crow and segregation. Blacks and natives separated from whites. That separation, that line cross, underfunded facilities, areas of inhabitants, lower wages paid to those who are black and brown, poor education system, if any at all. These were intentional systems set up to keep a class of people at a lower class while others were able to evolve and grow, and then not only just the systemic, there was actual physical attacks for neighborhoods and communities that were flourishing, that were growing. The bombings in Oklahoma, the Black Wall Street's destroyed, the numerous communities that were flourishing, were building economically, that are now sitting under lakes in the United States, that have been wiped out and wiped away from history. Illegal to vote, to put political powers in that may advance, the civil rights movements of the 60s, attacked, watched. I'm not making this up. Please do your own research. You're going to see verification of what I'm saying. And fortunately and unfortunately, we don't have time today to dig into all this. But all of this is well documented. Google one of these topics and go down the rabbit hole. So I wish this was made up, and I wish this did not happen. But these are the things that did happen. FBI attacks on the Black Power movement and the Civil Rights movement. No opportunities for economic advancement, redlining, keeping people, setting up a situation, setting up systems to keep a class of people and a race of people beneath. Now we have the late 60s and 70s, the normalization of the pimp and prostitute subculture in urban communities. During this time, 67, and this had been growing. Like I said, we don't have time to go through everything, but you'll find the 50s. You'll find the 40s where, prostitution in some areas and still to this day were legal. Where these the pimp was coined as a almost a superhero in the 60s and 70s. And Armand, you're 40 years old. How do you know this? Once again, through research, through other lived experience experts, through family members who are talking to me about the pimps in the neighborhood and them idolizing them. If you look at the Blaxploitation films, I have a picture of the Mac here with Max Julian, the actor, one of the largest, looked after, sought after pimp movies. And please go watch it. Please go watch it. You'll learn a lot. Even though it was filmed in the early 70s, you'll learn a lot from there on, and of characteristics and this mentality that is still here today. So the normalization of the pimp and prostitution subculture was not something that was a negative at these times. It was actually something that was accepted and in some places a lot of times honored. So the appearance, you'll notice a lot of appearance, the dress. At the bottom there's a picture of Bishop Don Magic Juan. This 60 and 70 era of the pimp culture, pimps and prostitution culture, as we now are in 2025, was a branding and a staple that's still here. If you were to Google image pimp or prostitute, you're going to see 90% of those images of costumes, of things that look and reflect this era right here. And during this time, this unwritten code of conduct of how this culture was supposed to operate really was stamped during this time period, the late 60s, early 70s. During the 1980s, I call the Black Plague, really the crack epidemic. This was a really horrible period for these urban communities. The pimp and prostitution subculture really, that from that late 60s, early 70s, was really destroyed. As the crack was introduced and brought into these communities, these urban communities, it became the pimp. It became the go-to. It became the full a continuance of the destruction of the families and the birth of what we see, the war on drugs, the police and law enforcement coming in and over criminalizing neighborhoods for rock cocaine, which similar powder cocaine that was used in upper neighborhoods, upper communities. People who were caught with those would get a fraction of the time in comparison to what was happening to these communities, these ghettos, these impoverished neighborhoods, which further destroyed families, separated fathers from the household. And like I said, the pimp and prostitution subculture fell victim to this crack epidemic. And gangs that did exist before, Bloods, Crips, that were originally created as protection and security for communities against racist attacks, had now been influenced by crack, by guns that were mysteriously introduced to the communities, and we got what we have now with the wars amongst the gangs, the 1980s. Why this is important to where we're getting to and where we're at now. We're just going through the roots. So we're working our way up. Okay, we started at the bottom. We started somewhat near the bottom of the roots, and we're working our way up to 2025. Late 80s, early 90s, the gang epidemic. So I was born in 1981. I had the opportunity to grow through this, to learn through this, to see this. As I started off, just countless murders, too many for me to number, to name, of friends, family that have been either shot, killed, or incarcerated over gangs. The Bloods and Crips, the war on drugs, the murder rate skyrocketing, mass incarceration over this nation happening, fatherless homes, kids growing up, the operation lock up the dad and that's gonna make things better only made things worse. We left abandoned children. If you look at the foster care system blowing up, people are misplaced, displaced, and without a place, not knowing what to do with themselves. I lived through that, as a kid into the early 90s. And really, it just, as a kid watching older generations, because I was a kid watching older generations go through this incarceration, murder, there was a different mentality that was brewing in me. Yes, I got involved. Yes, this was I thought was the cool and the way to be, and the music reflected it. But something inside of me was stretching for something different, although I had not the guidance and the mentorship to show me that difference. So through that late 80s and 90s gang epidemic, there, around 96, 97, there was starting to be a breakaway from the major gangs, the traditional gangs. In this picture here on the slide, you'll see me with a group of my friends. Three of those friends in this picture with me are no longer living. All victims of gun violence. At one point in their life had flirted with or been deeply involved in the pimping and prostitution subculture. But three of these friends are no longer living. So during this period, there was a shift happening. The music was changing from, I call it the bling bling era. You know, what was early 90s, it was majorly the music, the culture was gangster, was pressed upon us. It was pushed. Like you couldn't produce rap or hip hop music if it wasn't, if you weren't killing, shooting, if it wasn't gang involved. And that's what our leadership was. That was what was guiding our mentality, was that. But during the late 90s, the shift started happening, where instead of lowriders and Dickie suits, you had foreign cars, gold, diamonds, 24-inch rims, these things that were now flashed in front of our young, poor eyes, as this was now the go-to and what we wanted and achieved. But how do you do it if you don't know? How do you do it with the lack of mentorship, guidance as a man or woman, young boy, young girl growing up in the streets? So we were reaching for a way out and got introduced to the gang, 96, 97. That was the start and the thought. And was HBO's documentary, Pimps Up, Hoes Down, hit the scene, which further, I think that was that next level, that next staple of, here's what you do. It was almost like a written recipe book for us. And we studied it, wanted to get away from the gang life. And here was our answer, unfortunately. So during this time, the game exploded. 60% of my peers went into this lifestyle easily. And my peers, meaning the girls I went to school with from elementary on. The young men I went to school with from elementary on. This was the new cool. Girls would talk about other girls if they weren't making money off of sex. It was not a one-sided. This was a major shift in the young subcultures and urban cultures within America, which it may have been rooted in the hoods, rooted in the ghettos, but for mostly it's remained that way for the young men. But for young women to get involved, it reached into suburbia, reached into very wealthy neighborhoods. Women that were attracted to the hood lifestyle, to those men, got involved. And people say, well, you had an option. Yeah, you had it. We all had an option. It was like, eat trash or eat shit, pick your option. But to us, this seemed, and we talked about it I'm 44 now. Think about my mind as a 16-year-old boy. Think about your mind. What was your mind like as a kid? And as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old boy, with the lack of guidance, opportunities, and resources, this seemed like the visible option for us. And it was like, what, gangbang, sell drugs? No, we seen what happened with that through older generations. So this is where we went. Law enforcement, very much so aware and knew what was going on. Would call you by your pimp names. They knew, but it wasn't a targeted thing then. It wasn't, we want to go help survivors. We want to help these kids. This was not the case. If you weren't a gang member, selling drugs, a fourth waiver, they could care less. Go do what you do. And from there, 10 years, a decade plus of I would say, was a clean run of people going deeper and getting involved even more before it even raised an eyebrow. Roots. So there we are. And as time wraps up here, I said, I wish I could dig deeper, and I'm sorry I'm going so fast through this. But where are we now? Where are the kids and where are the generations of folks that I'm helping now? Because lucky for me, I was able to go through this, and grow through this. Many of my peers and friends did not. So where are the youth that I'm dealing with now as I'm still working in these communities? Yes, it's still there, but things have changed a lot. The culture has changed a lot, and honestly, there's been a recycle merge back, almost like a fashionable trend, from baggy to skinny to baggy to skinny, where people have merged back into a version of the gang culture and have left the subculture of pimping and prostitution. And yes, it still exists as it always has, but at a way lesser degree than it was in the mid 90s, early 2000s. We are not in the height of it right now, although many people, press that, but that is not what we're in right now. But we do have kids that are out stuck, dead, not knowing what to do with themselves, still impoverished without opportunities and resources, and almost like a state of depression, because those root causes, the lack of opportunity, poverty, and resources, have yet to be addressed. And incarcerating our way out of problems has never been the solution. It's like a plant growing from the ground and you want to get rid of a weed growing from the ground and you want to get rid of it, but all you do is snip the leaves without digging up the roots. You will always have that weed. And we are in this right now. So no matter what level of advocacy and awareness it is helping, please continue. But we need to address the root causes, and we also need to and should wrong word. We need to add on a focus of not just mostly woman survivor, but there are other broken legs on this table where, without addressing the young men, without bringing them other opportunities, and bringing even the women. There's so many women that are in this, young women that are in this subculture that don't feel a part of the current movement, whose awareness and prevention information does not reach them, relate to them, nor are they feeling a part of it. But they need these resources and opportunities as well. So what's next? What's the solution? On my end, everyone has their role to play. Every member of the football team is equally important. The water boy, the fan, the coach, the linebacker, everybody's role is equally important, and one's no greater than the other. Mine is focusing on solutions, and my solution is prevention, providing mentorship, tools to because I can only do so much. And the work that I've been doing over the decade, I know it works. So creating these tools to help prevent and destroy the preschool to prison pipeline as early as possible, with very early childhood prevention and education at a kindergarten, elementary school level to the middle school, high school level. And if they've gone beyond that, how to get them and break the cycle before they're a 50-year-old woman or man with 30 years of trauma built up. If this is not what you expected when you signed up for this presentation addressing the root causes of domestic urban pimping and prostitution, I don't know what to tell you, but we did a overview on those roots, where it started from. Like, not going too deep, because yes, sexual exploitation has been on this planet for as far back as documented letters, writing can describe. It's even written on in biblical texts, so we know it's been there. The trade of sexual favors for finances, for resources, it's been there. The taking advantage of people, the exploitation of people sexually for labor has been there. Wanted to have a starting point for this conversation and what we're talking about with domestic, urban, human sex trafficking. Once again, that is where my specialty lies, from lived experience, from trained experience, from research, from gaining knowledge, and really just dissecting where did this come from. I know the people that I work with, the kids, the boys and the girls that I work with. I know myself, my friends, we weren't monsters. Where did this activity come from? Where did this thought and this idea and this making this fair semen, where did it come from? And those root causes that, historically in this country and currently right now, what we're dealing with, those root causes are still the same, unfortunately. Lack of resources. Where does a kid with ideas at 6, 7, 8 years old, when asked that question in the classroom, what do you want to be when you grow up? I promise you that young man does not raise his hand and say, I want to be a pimp when I grow up. I want to traffic people. When I grow up, I want to be a drug dealer, a gang member. Those things don't happen. Those are learned behaviors and something that becomes your identity. That's something you're reaching for a lack of those resources, a lack of opportunities, when all you can see for yourself for excelling in life is to become some sort of sports star or entertainer, when you don't see an avenue for you to become successful other than what a community who, as we spoke on, was conditioned and put into a situation to where that was their reality, and you cannot see outside of those four corners. So those lack of opportunities, culturally relevant mentorship, culturally relevant prevention material, that mentor to be there to guide you, someone who, nowadays I'll say lived experience expert, someone who's been there, done that can help guide you through these hurdles and obstacles of life. That person, having them in there, quality mentorship missing. These are root causes that lead somebody going down these paths. Like I said, relevant prevention material, at an early age, like right now, it's getting started. We just finished a positive affirmation coloring book for young kids called Ari's World. And that it came out of a place from me towards my daughter. Like, if I wasn't here, what would I want to tell her that would prevent her from going down these paths? These seeds need to be planted early to prevent the roots of these weeds that are going to grow up with your child. So early prevention, as early as possible in age appropriate language. We don't need to wait. Don't wait. A lot of times, especially growing up in these communities, by middle school, it's often already embedded in them. They've grown up under, it wasn't like myself and my generation. Our older folks we looked up to were involved in gangbanging activities, drugs. We didn't really see, because of that 80s, we didn't see that pimping and prostitution culture. But by now, in 2025, going on 2026, the kids of my generation, grandkids, grew up learning and seeing that already. So that culture's been reestablished in here. So talking to a kid at 12, 13 years old to prevent those is highly needed. And as I continually will say, without getting rid of poverty, helping with economic financial literacy, helping with the economics, if we do not address that, these root causes, which poverty is one of the main, if not the main root cause, we're going to continue to see the same problem. So dealing with those root causes, poverty, lack of resources, lack of opportunity, lack of mentorship. Those are the root causes that we are dealing with today, and they need to be addressed. And so I know we fast forward through a lot of stuff, and there's so much more in between. I do know that. Several of you may disagree with what I'm talking about. That's fine. I'm used to it. I've been dealing with this and doing this work for 15 years. Credible work, changing lives, building people, men and women. So God has a mission for me, and God may have a different mission for you that's separate. And we don't have to agree on everything. But I think our commonalities and what we can agree on is this crisis, this epidemic needs to end. And truly, my belief is without ending poverty, we will never end human trafficking. We can dent it. We can slow it down. We can help those individuals involved. But as long as we have poverty, lack of education for some and not for others, as long as the distribution of economic is different for some, as long as we have systemic racism involved, this preschool to prison pipeline created, we're not going to get out of this domestic urban human sex trafficking. It's still going to be there, because there's going to be some young lady, some young man that sees this as a viable option for themselves. We look at music. I don't know what comes first, the chicken or the egg. Does the music produce the culture? Or does the culture produce the music? But if you listen to any female rapper right now, most female rappers right now, you can't put one on without hearing the over-sexualization of themselves, and really professing that if you're not selling your body, what are you doing in some form? We don't have it, mostly in what I'm experiencing and seeing with those, it's not as many traditional pimps that are happening, and most young women that I know, and women that are still in the game that have been in for 20 years, a lot of them are operating without a pimp. And so we're dealing with a very different time, and I need to end this now so I can answer questions. And like I said, my contact information is here. Please reach out if you'd like to talk about anything anymore than what we've discussed today. I have 45 minutes to run through some root causes, and let's do this. Okay, my name's Armand King. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to any correspondence that you may have.